My sister listened to her boyfriend and killed me to take all the property. My name is Jesse Hart, and I know this might sound impossible, but I'm telling this story after I died. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Ethan's Way. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. I remember the crunch of gravel under tires, the hum of my old pickup struggling uphill, the way the steering wheel trembled ever so slightly in my hands. It was late. I just left my uncle's farm 3 towns over. I was tired, but not drunk. The radio crackled softly, static and blues. My seatbelt clicked into place like it always did, and for a while, the road was just dark ribbons stretching between trees. Then it happened. A jolt. Something yanked the wheel from beneath me. I swerved, slammed the brakes, but the truck didn't stop. It pulled left hard, and I saw nothing but trees rushing up like a wall. There was a snap of metal. Glass burst. Pain shot through me like lightning. And then, silence. Not the kind that follows impact, the kind that follows everything. When I say I'm dead, I don't mean in a ghost story kind of way. I mean the Jesse Hart people knew the caretaker of my family's land, the older brother, the one who fixed everything and asked for nothing. That man was gone. And the people who took me, my sister, and the man she thought she loved. I wasn't supposed to find out. No one was supposed to know what happened on that road wasn't an accident. But death, it turns out, doesn't make you blind. It sharpens you, lets you see people for who they really are. That's how I saw Troy first, standing in my hospital room, staring at my broken body, holding my sister's hand like he'd always belonged. April cried. He didn't. Let me go back a bit. We owned 86 acres of land passed down through 3 generations. A mix of open field forest and farmland, nothing flashy but rich with value. Our mother had grown sick the year before, and I'd taken the burden of running the place. April helped when she could, but she wasn't built for dirt under the nails. She wanted more, fancier, cleaner. Then Troy showed up, suit jackets over hoodies, smooth voice, a grin like a wolf's. He sold real estate on the side, flipped houses with borrowed money, talked fast and touched too often. I knew his type before he said a word, and I knew he saw our land the same way buzzards see a carcass. April fell hard. Or maybe she just wanted to believe someone saw her as more than the little sister always standing behind me. They moved fast, too fast, and I should have done more than just warn her. Back in the hospital room I listened. Yes, listened. Call it limbo spirit, whatever you want. I was still tethered, and what I heard changed everything. Once the papers are through, Troy whispered, we can sell off the back acres. I've got buyers. April hesitated. What about Jesse's share? There was silence. Then it's in motion. She didn't ask what that meant. She didn't stop him. She just nodded. And I knew then, they weren't planning around my accident. They were counting on it. You ever wonder what it feels like to realize your own family is preparing to bury you? Not just literally, but legally, financially, emotionally. I lay there in that bed, unseen, unheard, while the woman who once held my hand after Dad died now helped her boyfriend pick over my future. And the worst part, I loved her anyway. They pulled the plug 6 days later. Official cause, brain death from traumatic injury. Unrecoverable, peaceful. No one questioned it, except for one man, my godfather Everett, a Vietnam vet turned small-town mechanic. Quiet, brutal when crossed. The kind of man who doesn't show up unless it matters. He showed up to my funeral in a jacket 2 sizes too big and never shed a tear. But I saw his hand tighten around a folded envelope in his pocket. The one I'd left him 3 weeks earlier. That envelope, that was my backup. Because deep down, even before the crash, I knew something wasn't right. I had recorded a series of private messages, diary entries, really stored in a cloud account only Everett could access if I ever went missing. I thought maybe I was being paranoid. Turns out I wasn't paranoid enough. At my burial, April looked wrecked, smeared makeup, shaking hands, endless whispers of, I just can't believe it. But I watched the way she kept checking her phone, waiting for updates, waiting for what exactly? Maybe the final transfer to clear. Maybe Troy to tell her it was done. She'd get the house, he'd get the land, and I'd be a footnote. But here's the thing about being underestimated dead doesn't always mean defeated. After my burial, everything moved fast, too fast. The flowers on my grave hadn't wilted yet, and April was already dressing the guest house like it was her new sanctuary. She moved out of our mother's room and into the one I used to sleep in. My boots were still in the closet. My coat still hung behind the door. She didn't remove them. She ignored them. That's what haunted me most. She didn't cry when she boxed up my books. She didn't linger when she passed my framed photo with Dad. She just looked past it all like she had trained herself not to see me, like I'd already been gone long before the crash. The family house was a sprawling but modest place, 2 floors wrap-around porch, built with the kind of labor that turns hands to leather. My grandfather raised cattle on the fields behind it. I repaired the porch with my own hands just 3 summers back. It smelled like cedar motor oil and old family recipes. But now, it smelled like him. Troy had moved in with April, worn-in sneakers in the hallway, laptop left on the kitchen table. I watched as he put his feet on the coffee table I built for Mom on her 60th birthday, and April didn't say a word. The worst part? They laughed. He'd crack jokes over beer. She'd lean on him like a schoolgirl. They'd sit on my couch planning their future, their new company, their real estate revival. They even discussed changing the mailbox from Hart to Kincaid, his last name. That stung more than I expected. But remember what I said, I left something behind. 3 weeks before the crash, I felt it in my gut, a heaviness I couldn't name. So I met with my godfather Everett and handed him an envelope sealed and thick with backup flash drives, login credentials, and instructions. I even recorded a video message, the kind where I looked directly into the camera, and said, "If you're seeing this, Everett, I'm either dead or close enough to it." He thought I was being dramatic. Now, he knew better. You might think this is the point where revenge kicks in, where someone bursts in, files get leaked, courtrooms ignite, and guilt burns clean through the air. But no, that's not how this kind of betrayal works. It's slower. It unfolds like rot under the floorboards, quiet, steady, undeniable once it breaks the surface. Everett didn't storm into town yelling accusations. He watched. He played the long game. He called April, dropped off some tools, made small talk with Troy. He even brought over barbecue. He smiled while feeding the wolves just to see which one bit first. And one night, Troy slipped. He mentioned a back-acre parcel that wasn't public record, yet land only I had access to. Everett didn't flinch. He just nodded. Then he went home, logged into the backup drive, and opened the file labeled Troy Warning. In it, I'd recorded myself listing the exact reasons I didn't trust him, his sudden interest in property law, the night I caught him photographing my deed drawer, the email I intercepted with quick flip exit strategy in the subject line. I even showed copies of texts between April and Troy, ones I'd seen accidentally, when she left her phone in the truck. They were planning something, and now Everett had proof. Back at the house, April was unraveling in slow motion. She drank more wine at night, stared out the window for hours. She barely visited Mom in hospice anymore, and when she did, she sat there like a stranger, her words clipped her eyes hollow. Troy, on the other hand, was thriving, slick, charming, smiling with his teeth. He started making phone calls on the porch, loud and unfiltered, selling off sections of their land without hesitation. But there was one problem: the will. You see, 2 months before my death, I had changed everything. After sensing that April wasn't just being manipulated but might be complicit, I rewrote my will with a private attorney. It placed everything into a conditional trust. The language was airtight. If I died under suspicious or violent circumstances, my assets would be frozen and investigated before any transfer occurred. The condition: the trust would only activate if the original physical will was presented in court, not the copy April had access to. And guess where the original was? Not in the house, not in the safe, not even on the property. It was with Everett, still sealed, still untouched, waiting for the right time. And that time came the day Troy tried to sell the lakefront cabin, my father's pride and joy. Everett intervened, calmly, quietly. He walked into the county office and dropped the envelope on the clerk's desk. "Open," that he said. "You'll want to see what Jesse left you." I wish I could have seen their faces when the deal got flagged, when the title froze, when the county issued a hold, when the law came knocking. April must have panicked. She called everyone, drove to the clerk's office in tears. But it was too late. The trust had kicked in. Investigators started digging into emails, phone logs, security cams, my truck's black box. They discovered tampering, brake fluid leakage, fresh cuts to the steering column, not a malfunction. Sabotage. And this was just the beginning. because the more they dug, the more they found, and the more April realized she had no idea who Troy really was. The town always had its whispers, but after the property deal froze, the whispers turned into open stares. April tried to act normal, running errands, smiling politely, pretending her world wasn't collapsing behind her, but people knew something was off. Troy, on the other hand, disappeared for 2 days. When he finally re-emerged, he looked rattled. No more slicked back hair or confident posture, just a man who realized that when you play with fire, sometimes it burns faster than you can run. And yet April clung to him, like he was the only rope left in a collapsing house. But that rope was fraying. Let's rewind a bit. April and I weren't always like this. She was my little sister, my shadow when we were kids. I used to carry her on my shoulders through the apple orchard. She called me her big tree because she thought I'd always stand tall no matter what. When Mom got sick, we promised we'd protect each other, but protection doesn't mean blindness, and love doesn't mean loyalty. When she met Troy, I gave him the benefit of the doubt for about 10 minutes. Then he started asking too many questions. How many acres do y'all own? Is everything under Jesse's name or split with your mom? Do you know what the land's worth on paper? And April just answered him, like she was proud of it, like she didn't understand what a man like that could do with that kind of information. I started watching him. It wasn't hard, he was careless. He left browser tabs open searches like accelerated property transfer, how to dissolve a family trust death certificate requirements for title. He thought I was too simple to check, too busy managing fields and machines. But I'm not simple. I just don't talk unless I mean it. And one day, I finally did. I cornered April after dinner. Troy had gone out for a walk. I sat her down, looked her in the eye and said, "He's not who you think he is. You need to stop letting him into our business." She blinked, laughed. "You're paranoid, Jesse. You're threatened. You've never liked anyone I dated." She wasn't wrong, but this was different. "He's manipulating you. He loves me. No, April, he loves our land." That's when she stood up, her face flushed, hands trembling. "You're just mad that someone finally challenged your authority. You think you own everything, Mom. The house me." Her voice cracked. "You don't get to control everything forever." That was the last real conversation we ever had. Now, from wherever I exist, call it the in-between. Call it Justice's waiting room. I watch her unravel. It started small. She'd forget to lock the shed, leave the stove on, talk to herself in the kitchen. Then came the dreams, the guilt. She'd wake up screaming my name. Once she smashed a mirror, said she saw me in the reflection. I wasn't there. Not really, but maybe part of me was. Then the evidence began stacking up. The black box in my truck was reviewed again. A mechanic turned forensic specialist found a cut to the brake line that was deliberate, not corrosion, not wear and tear. And the camera from a gas station showed Troy crouched by my truck hours before the crash, a rag in his hand, no tools, just enough. April was called in for questioning. She claimed she knew nothing. Troy said the same, but their timelines didn't match. Their stories didn't align, and someone, maybe a clerk, maybe a cop, sent an anonymous tip to the press. Headline: the next morning, local heir's death. Now a criminal investigation, foul play suspected. I watched from above as April's hands shook, reading the paper. She folded it twice, then tore it up. But she couldn't tear up what came next, a court summons. Probate was halted, all assets frozen, trust triggered, and my will read aloud in front of everyone. To my sister April I leave my forgiveness, but not my land. If this letter reaches you after my death and foul play is suspected, then you already know why. The lawyer paused. Everyone stared. April looked like someone had knocked the air out of her, because deep down she did know. She just didn't think I'd ever speak from the grave. The town turned cold. She walked into the diner, silence. She walked into the grocery store, glances, then backs turned. Troy refused to be seen with her in public anymore. He said it was to protect her, but it was really to protect himself. The final twist came 2 weeks later. Troy took a deal. Pled partial guilt for involuntary sabotage, pinned the motive on April, said she was grieving, confused, obsessed with inheritance, said she made him do it. April was arrested the next morning. No tears, no screams, just one whisper as they cuffed her. "Jesse, I'm sorry, but it was too late." If you were in this situation, would you forgive or take revenge? Comment below to let us know. It's strange how silence can echo louder than words. After April's arrest, the house felt like a skeleton. Every creak in the wood, every hollow room felt like it remembered what they did. I watched from that in-between space where you're not quite gone, but no one remembers to look for you anymore. And I listened as the world tried to move on. But justice doesn't move on, it settles, like dust, like truth. Troy's betrayal didn't shock me. He was always a parasite feeding off the warmth of others until there was nothing left. But what did surprise me was how fast he turned. I imagined he'd hold out longer, keep some twisted version of loyalty. But the second the heat touched his skin, he folded. In his deposition, he painted a portrait of April that even I didn't recognize. She wanted Jesse out of the way, he said calmly. She knew the only way to unlock the property was through his absence. When the lawyer pressed, he added, "She used me. I never thought she'd go through with it, but I was scared to leave." That was the dagger. She'd been loyal to him, protected him, burned every bridge for him, and in return, he tossed her under the bus like a bag of trash on fire. I thought maybe she'd fight, deny, blame him, but she didn't. She sat through every hearing in silence, eyes sunken, shoulders drawn. Not once did she speak my name, but I could see it on her face, the guilt, the rot crawling under her skin. It wasn't grief, it was recognition of what she'd done and who she'd become. You might think I felt vindicated, but I didn't. I just felt empty, because no one really wins in stories like this. Not when the people you once loved, truly loved, become the ones who sign your death warrant with a smile. Everett, my godfather, took over the trust. He was the executor of my final wishes. He followed every detail I'd outlined. The property was never to be sold. The farmhouse was to be converted into a shelter for displaced veterans. The back 12 acres were to remain untouched, just as Dad had wanted. And Mom, still in hospice, would continue receiving full care from that land's revenue. Everett did all of it without asking for thanks, because he was the kind of man April forgot still existed in this world. Troy was sentenced to 10 years for manslaughter and fraud. April, well, her trial was more complicated. Her lawyer argued emotional duress, manipulation, and residual grief. They dragged my name through the mud a bit, called me controlling, paranoid, overbearing. I didn't flinch, because when truth is on your side, you don't need to defend what's already known. In the end, April took a plea, 3 years reduced with good behavior. When the sentence was read, she didn't cry, but she looked at Everett as she was led away. He nodded once, she blinked, and then she was gone. The house stands still today, paint chipping, porch creaking, but alive. Everett keeps it going with the help of a few good men. Mom passed peacefully 3 months after April's sentencing, not from heartbreak, but from peace. She'd found out the truth, and for her, that was enough. She whispered, "Tell Jesse I'm proud," before she slipped away. I heard her, I really did, and that was the first time in all of this. I smiled, because in the end, this wasn't just a story of betrayal. It was a story of warning, of what happens when we let greed dress itself up as love, of what happens when we silence our instincts for the sake of family, and of what happens when one man refuses to go quietly even after death. There's a strange peace that comes after the chaos settles, not because things return to normal, but because you finally know who everyone really is. April served 18 months before she was released early. Good behavior, therapy, a written apology to the trust. I watched her step out of that gate with nothing in her hands but everything weighing on her shoulders. She didn't go back to the house. She didn't visit the land. She didn't even try to see Mom's grave. Instead, she moved to a small town 2 counties over, got a job at a thrift store, rented a 1-bedroom apartment near the edge of town. She wore oversized sweaters and avoided mirrors, but she was alive, and that was her punishment. Troy, on the other hand, wasn't doing so well. Prison changes people, especially men who were never built for it. Last I heard, he was transferred to a low-security facility after an incident. No more suits, no more fast talk. Just a man trying to survive the walls he once thought only others deserved. Good. But this story isn't just about them anymore. It's about the land and legacy and what we choose to leave behind. Everett did something I hadn't expected. He started bringing in volunteers. Young vets, single dads, people recovering from addiction. They built a small greenhouse where the barn used to be, fixed the fencing along the east boundary, repainted the shed with bright red and white trim. The land came back to life, and in doing so, so did I in memory, if not in body. There's a bench now at the edge of the field near the creek where April and I used to fish. A simple plaque reads, "For Jesse, who stood tall so others could find their footing. People sit there and talk like I'm still around. Some laugh, some cry, some just watch the water move. I listen to them all. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd just ignored my gut, if I hadn't made backups, if I hadn't trusted Everett, if I hadn't prepared for the unthinkable. But then I remember people like Troy count on silence. They count on you loving someone so much you'd never believe they'd hurt you. And sometimes that's exactly how they win. But I didn't let them win. Even from the grave, I made sure my story was told through the trust, through the recordings, through the people who remembered who I was when it mattered most. And that's why I'm telling you now. Because if you've got something to protect, a legacy, a truth, your own worth, do it before it's too late. I was the one left behind for most of my life, passed over, ignored, used. But now I'm the one who decides what stays and what doesn't. Some people think justice ends when the gavel hits the desk, but that's not how it works, not in real life. Justice lingers, it hovers, it asks hard questions long after the courtroom empties, and if you're lucky, it transforms. In the year following April's release, the farmhouse evolved into something no one could have predicted. What was once a quiet piece of land burdened with secrets became a place of healing. Everett named it Heart Haven. People started calling it the land that forgave. I never intended for it to be poetic, but maybe that's the point. Sometimes stories take on meaning you never imagined, especially when you're no longer the one telling them. April kept her distance. She didn't dare step near the property lines, but she did start writing journals, letters. Most she never sent. Some made their way into Everett's mailbox. He read each one quietly, never responding. That was his style, silent accountability. He didn't need to punish. He just held space for truth to burn itself out. One letter stood out. It was simple. Just a folded page with ink smudges at the corners. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't expect it. But I wake up every day thinking about the bench, and I know one thing: he would have made a better world than I ever could. So now, I try, even if no one sees it. April Everett read it, folded it back, and placed it in the drawer with my will. People came to the farm for different reasons. Some were broken, some were building. One man named Jonah, a former Marine who lost his brother to suicide, stood at the fence one day and whispered, "This place feels like it remembers." That stuck with me, because it did remember. Every nail, every post, every scar in the wood, it remembered the hands that built it. Mine, my father's, even April's when she was still good. Legacy doesn't always come from perfection. Sometimes it grows from ashes. The sheriff visited one afternoon. He parked his cruiser under the old oak tree and walked the property line like he used to with Dad. He told Everett the final forensic review was done. They'd confirmed Troy's fingerprints on the brake line cutter. April's messages to him detailing plans to move forward after Jesse. Financial records showing Troy transferring large sums in anticipation of land sales. It was open and shut now. Too late to change anything, but not too late to close it. The sheriff looked up at the bench, gave a small nod, and said, "He got the last word." "Huh?" Everett smiled. "He got the truth." "That's better." By the second summer, the land began to bloom differently. There were sunflowers on the northern field, ones I never planted. Kids from the shelter built a chicken coop and named every bird after someone they missed. And my favorite part, they restored the old swing April and I used to fight over as kids. It squeaked a little now, but it held, just like us. People often ask Everett if I left a final message, something deep, a secret, a revenge letter, a confession. But the truth is, I didn't need to. My message was everything I left behind: the will, the trust, the warning, the love. Because revenge is a moment, but legacy, that's a decision. And I chose mine carefully. I always thought I'd be the one to leave. I had spent years planning it in my head, how I'd finally get in my truck drive, out past the town's last gas station, and never look back. How I'd disappear into some small coastal town, start over, grow a beard, maybe learn to fish. But the truth is, you never really leave a place like this. Not when it's in your blood, and certainly not when you leave in a casket. The irony. It wasn't the land that buried me. It was family. April was back. She showed up on a Tuesday, not to grieve, not to confess, but to claim what she believed was hers. She walked in with dark sunglasses, a manila folder, and the same boyfriend who'd vanished the day of the accident, Troy. He was leaner now, shaven and dressed in a black button-up that looked more lawyer than farmhand, but his eyes were still cold, calculating. I watched from the window, the one overlooking the gravel path we used to race down as kids, the one Dad built with his own hands stone by stone, and now they were walking up it like it was a red carpet to their next conquest. Everett opened the door with the kind of stare that could freeze rain. April didn't flinch. She gave him a small nod, almost sympathetic, like she knew what was coming. "I want to talk," she said. "No," Everett replied flatly. "You want to own." Troy raised a brow. "We have rights. We've spoken to a probate attorney." That word probate landed like a punch to Everett's chest. I could feel it from where I stood. I had left no official will, no video, no formal signature beyond the documents Dad and I had filed together years ago. All legally binding, but not airtight. Everett had possession, but April had blood. And in the eyes of the law, sometimes that's enough to unlock doors the heart would rather keep sealed. The meeting took place at the kitchen table, the same one where we had family dinners and birthday cakes. Now it held legal pads, coffee rings, and the reek of betrayal. April slid the manila folder across the wood. "This is what I'm asking for. Not all of it, just my share." Everett didn't touch the folder. "I buried my brother a week ago," he said. "And you're here asking for land? I'm here asking for what was always mine." She snapped, voice cracking. "Jesse may have stayed, but he didn't build this alone." "You didn't build anything," Everett growled. "You ran." "I left because I couldn't take it anymore," April replied, tears rising. "I left because Jesse made this place feel like a grave before anyone died." That one hit hard, even me, because somewhere in her twisted view she believed that. Troy, ever the puppet master, leaned in. "We understand this is emotional, but there's value here, and my client, your client is my sister Everett cut in, not your paycheck." April's hands were shaking now, whether from fear or fury I couldn't tell. But then came the twist, the line that changed everything. She said, "You think Jesse would have left you everything? You think he trusted you?" Everett narrowed his eyes. April reached into her bag and pulled out a page. Not legal, personal. It was my handwriting. A letter I'd written years ago, never meant to be seen. Just musings, reflections, the kind I used to scribble when life felt too heavy. In it, I'd written Everett means well. But sometimes I wonder if he's really cut out for this land. If I go, will he make it last, or will the orchard rot under his silence? It was just a fear, just a passing doubt. But in her hands, it became a weapon. "I found this in one of Dad's old notebooks," she said. "Don't pretend Jesse didn't question you too." Everett didn't speak, but his jaw clenched so tight I thought it might snap. They left that day without resolution, but the crack had formed, and April knew it. She wasn't here for peace. She was here for pressure, for leverage, to claim her share before the dust on my grave had even settled. That night, Everett sat alone in the barn, lights off, just him, a bottle of whiskey, and my old flannel jacket slung over a beam. Marcus tried to talk to him, so did our cousin Nate. But Everett just said one thing: "I don't know if I deserve it." That broke me, because whatever doubts I scribbled on paper meant nothing compared to what that man had done for this land for me in the end. He had bled for this place, bled for me. And now April wanted to bleed it dry. The following week was a legal storm. Letters arrived, meetings were requested, mediators got involved. April didn't back down. She kept claiming her entitlement, and Troy, slick and professional, made sure she never missed a deadline, never lost her posture. They even brought up selling the house. The place where Mom braided her hair, where Dad died in the upstairs bed, where I carved my name into the windowsill. And suddenly, the battle wasn't just about inheritance, it was about memory, about ownership of legacy. Marcus came to Everett late one night. He looked older than usual, tired, bruised by the weight of family drama no teenager should ever carry. "You're not him," Marcus said quietly. Everett looked up. "Not who? Not Jesse? And you don't have to be. You just have to fight like you would." Everett nodded once, then twice. That was the moment something changed in him. The self-doubt didn't disappear, but it got buried beneath something fiercer: resolve. The next morning he called a meeting. No lawyers, no paperwork, just April and Troy on one side of the kitchen, him on the other, and me everywhere in between. He laid out photos, handwritten records, tax receipts, a lifetime of evidence showing that April may have shared blood, but she had never lifted a hand to keep this place alive. Then he said something I'll never forget. Jesse didn't write a will because he thought blood was enough. Turns out, sometimes it isn't. He slid over a single envelope. Inside, a buyout offer. Enough to settle the fight, enough to close the door. April stared at it for a long time, then took it, not because she wanted peace, but because she saw that Everett wasn't going to break, and neither was I. Even in death, peace is never quiet, not when it's forced, not when it's bought. Everett's buyout offer may have ended the legal storm, but the emotional damage rippled far beyond signatures and settlement checks. April took the money. Troy smiled smug, victorious, and just like that, they disappeared again. No farewell, no apology, no visit to my grave, but the land remembered, and so did we. Everett didn't celebrate, not even a quiet beer or a nod of relief. He just got up the next morning and went back to work. The barn roof needed patching. The east field had overgrown. The irrigation lines were backed up from the week of rain. Nature, as always, didn't care about family drama. She just demanded care, and Everett gave it, without complaint, without collapse. But he did change. He stopped talking to people unless absolutely necessary. He avoided the house's second floor, the floor with my room untouched since the funeral. And at night I'd find him sitting in the dark, the old ledger open on his lap, running his fingers over my handwriting, like he was trying to trace me back into existence. Marcus was the only one who could pull him out. He'd slip into Everett's silence like he'd been there before, which he had. We both had. He'd drop a rake next to his uncle and say, "We planning today or staring at ghosts?" Everett would grunt, then plant. It became their rhythm, a quiet rebuilding, one root at a time. It was Marcus who first said the word, legacy. He was in the barn pulling down old crates of unused tools when he found a dusty box labeled Jesse's Grant Ideas. I had scribbled down thoughts on starting a fund, something small, something simple. Maybe for kids who'd lost parents, maybe for teens who'd never had a chance to dream. Marcus carried it to the porch and sat with Everett. "You think we could actually do this?" Everett looked at the yellowing pages, then at the orchard. "I think we have to." They started small. A Facebook page, a local fundraiser, a bake sale at the farmer's market with a handwritten sign that said, "Help us grow Jesse's orchard wider." People showed up. People gave. People remembered. The town had watched me grow up, watched Everett stay, watched April disappear. They knew who had kept this place alive, and they were ready to water that truth. The Jesse Hart Legacy Grant launched that fall. 3 students applied, 2 were accepted. One cried so hard on the call, she couldn't speak, only whisper, "Thank you. No one ever gave me anything before." Marcus handled the interviews. Everett wrote the acceptance letters. I watched from the old swing. That was the first time in months I felt seen again. But not everything bloomed, because rot always tries to return. And this time it did through the land itself. It started with the orchard's oldest tree, the one I used to climb as a kid. Leaves yellowed too early, bark cracked like dry skin, fruit shriveled before harvest. Then others followed, not all, but enough. Everett had the soil tested, fungus, spread by standing water. Old pipes were failing, drainage was off. And worst of all, the records I used to keep the old maps and schedules were missing, gone, likely tossed during April's brief but chaotic stay. "Damn it," Everett muttered, slamming a rusted pipe down on the barn floor. "She didn't just take money, she took order." Marcus tried to calm him. "We'll rebuild it, from scratch." But Everett wasn't built for disorder. He needed the lines, the columns, the ledger. Without them, he drifted toward despair. That was when the letter came. No return address. Again, just a folded note on cream paper tucked inside the mailbox. "I'm sorry I ruined what you built. I'm sorry I didn't stop him sooner. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know I still carry him." There was no money this time, no demands, just ink and regret. Everett stood there for a long time, then tore it in half, and placed both pieces beneath a stone beside the garden bed. He didn't burn them, didn't throw them away, just let them stay split but present. I wish I could have told him it was enough, that the ache in April's words meant more than silence ever could. But healing doesn't come when you want it. It comes when it's ready. One afternoon, Marcus found an old ledger of mine in the attic. It had fallen behind a trunk damp and torn but salvageable. Inside were all the original irrigation notes, diagrams, fertilizer logs, seasonal cycles. It was like finding a voice from the grave. Everett held it in his hands like scripture. "You never really leave anything behind, huh?" he murmured. Marcus grinned. "Not when you bury it deep enough." That night they started repairs, new pipes, raised beds, compost stations, and a new plan to rotate crop varieties that could survive harsher soil conditions. The land began to breathe again, and so did Everett. A few weeks later, Marcus hosted a small bonfire. No guests, just him and Everett, and me. They burned the last of Troy's leftover tools: hammer, wire, the measuring tape April had borrowed before their great disappearance. The fire crackled. Marcus leaned back, looking at the flames. "You think they'll ever come back?" he asked. Everett didn't hesitate. "No, but if they did," Everett tossed another piece of wood into the fire. "They'd find nothing left to steal. Legacy isn't just what you leave, it's what no one can take. Time has a strange way of twisting memory. Some days the orchard felt exactly as I remembered: crisp wind rustling the leaves, the smell of apple skins and old soil. Other days I could barely recognize it. The barn had new planks, the front gate had a fresh coat of paint, and Everett, well, Everett was different too, not softer, not harder, just heavier. He carried silence like a second skin now. You could see it in the way he moved, careful, restrained, as if every decision had to honor both what had been lost and what might still grow. And Marcus, he was blooming. That boy who once stammered through his thoughts was now leading small school tours through the orchard, teaching kids how to graft branches, testing irrigation sensors, even mentoring the newest grant recipients. If legacy had a face, it was his. And still, there were shadows. They came back, April and Troy, not physically, but through the town. A lawyer arrived one day, clean-cut and smiling, asking if Everett would be open to a conversation. Everett shut the door in his face. But it didn't stop the pressure. Turns out April had sold her buyout funds to a land investor, a quiet backroom deal. The investor now claimed interest in adjacent development potential. Corporate speak for "we want the land and we don't care whose bones are buried in it." The buyer, a shell company linked to Troy's newest firm. Figures. Everett's fists clenched so tightly the veins in his wrist popped. "They're still coming for it," he whispered. "They always were," Marcus replied, "but we're still standing." The next few weeks were tense. Lawyers called. A survey team showed up at the border of the orchard, snapping photos and pretending not to see the no trespassing signs. Everett called the sheriff, who came but only issued a warning. "You gotta understand," the sheriff said. "These people have money, real estate lawyers. They're not like the folks we're used to handling." Everett stared him down. "I don't care if they ride in with golden horses. This land isn't theirs." The orchard community rallied. Families who'd received scholarships came with signs. Local teachers wrote letters to the town board. Even the school's debate team held a protest near the western fence, chanting, "This orchard grows more than fruit." Marcus filmed it, posted it online. Within 2 days, the video hit 100,000 views. Within 5, it got picked up by a local news station. A reporter came out, interviewed Everett on the porch. He didn't say much, just stood in front of the barn with the camera on his face and said, "This land buried my brother. It raised my nephew. It gave people hope. No one's taking it, not while I'm still breathing." The video went viral. That night, Marcus sat on the porch steps while Everett smoked silently beside him. "Uncle Everett," he asked. "Yeah, if they come back again, if they really come for it. What are we willing to do?" Everett took a drag, blew out the smoke. "Whatever it takes." Marcus nodded, didn't flinch. That was the moment I realized he wasn't just carrying on my name. He was becoming what I never had the time to fully be: a protector of what mattered most. April finally called. Not a lawyer, not Troy, her. She left a voicemail. It was shaky, uneven, half pride, half regret. "Everett, I didn't know he'd sell the contract, I swear. I thought it was just money. I didn't mean for them to come for the land. I never wanted it to go that far. I just..." Pause. "Maybe I'm calling too late, but I wanted you to know. I still dream about him. Jesse, I hear his voice sometimes. I think it's guilt or punishment, maybe both." She hung up. Everett listened to it twice, then deleted it. but I heard her, and for the first time in years I didn't feel angry. I just felt tired, because death doesn't fix betrayal, and guilt doesn't undo choices. Troy, on the other hand, didn't feel guilt. He sent a formal letter threatening litigation for obstruction of potential acquisition. Everett read it, then burned it in the fireplace with the rest of the junk mail. The war wasn't in paperwork anymore, it was in legacy, and we had already chosen our battlefield. Then came the final blow, or what was meant to be. A developer offered the town a proposal: buy the orchard, rezone the land, and build a commercial plaza, promising tax revenue, job creation, and modern revitalization. On paper, it looked appealing, to politicians at least. Everett got an email from the mayor's office requesting dialogue. He didn't respond, he acted. 3 days later, Everett filed a new deed status. The orchard was to become a historical trust named after the Hart family. Permanent, protected, untouchable. The papers were notarized, stamped, and sent to the state office. And just like that, the land became more than ours. It became part of everyone. The trust meant no selling, no development, no corporate acquisition. But it also meant no more expansion. Everett had to give up his plans to buy the next plot over. No more rows of future trees, no more expansion dreams. But he didn't hesitate, because sometimes preservation matters more than growth. Sometimes you fight not to win, but to not lose what matters. Marcus held a small ceremony, nothing fancy, just some candles, photos of me. A new plaque near the tree line that read, "This land belonged to Jesse Hart. Now it belongs to what he believed in." People came, teachers, students, single mothers. A man who once tried to steal from our orchard showed up crying quietly and left a single apple at the base of the tree. I watched from the shadows, no longer bitter, just at peace. Because for the first time, I wasn't worried about what might be taken. I knew what would stay. The orchard slept sounder after the trust became law. No more surveyors, no more notices, no more late-night anxiety over signatures and loopholes. But something else started to stir, not outside, inside. Everett, after months of silent war, finally sat down one morning and cried, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet breaking shoulders, shaking hands, gripping the kitchen table, his head bowed like he was ashamed to feel anything at all. Marcus stood nearby, unsure whether to walk away or hold him. Then he did both. He didn't say a word, just placed a hand on Everett's shoulder and stayed there until the sobbing passed. It was the kind of grief that doesn't have a timestamp. The kind that accumulates over years of being the one who holds it all together. I don't think Everett ever expected to outlive all of us, Mom and Dad, me, the people he thought he'd always lean on. But here he was, the last man standing in a house filled with memories and a field filled with my footsteps, and he kept it going anyway. That was his power, his quiet strength. A few weeks later, Marcus walked into my old room. It hadn't changed much still, the same blue walls, the same guitar in the corner with one broken string. But this time, Marcus wasn't just visiting. He had a box in his hands, inside a stack of letters bound by twine. My letters, ones I'd written but never sent, to old friends, to Everett, even to April. Marcus placed them on the desk and said, "We should publish these." Everett blinked. "What do you mean, as a book? Not for fame or money, for them. The kids who don't think their voice matters. You always said Jesse had a way with words. Maybe it's time more people read them." Everett said nothing, but later that night I saw him holding the stack by the firelight, lips moving silently as he read each line. They called it Letters from the Orchard. Marcus designed the cover himself, a sketch of the barn under twilight, with a single apple tree in bloom. Everett wrote the foreword, and on the inside flap they printed a quote I'd once scrawled in the margin of an old notebook. "Some roots grow stronger after you're gone. Let them." The book sold modestly online, but in our town it spread like wind. Teachers read it aloud. A church group hosted a reading circle. Even the sheriff, the same one who once shrugged at April's lawyers, came by with a copy for Everett to sign. That fall, the orchard hosted its first legacy festival. Games for kids, tours of the grounds, a booth for grant sign-ups, and a small wooden bench placed beneath my favorite tree. On it, a plaque read, "This is where Jesse used to sit and dream. Now, it's your turn." April didn't come, but she did send something, a single envelope. Inside, a photo of us as kids, me aged 10, her 7. We were sitting in the dirt covered in mud eating apples with the stems still on. On the back she had written, "I wish we'd stayed there. No return address, no phone number, just those 5 words." Everett didn't react much when Marcus handed him the photo, just nodded and tucked it into the drawer with my letters. Then he turned to Marcus and said, "She's not coming back, but maybe that's okay." Marcus tilted his head. "You think she's sorry?" Everett shrugged. "Maybe, but some roads once broken don't lead home again." That night, Marcus played my old guitar badly but with heart. He plucked the broken string until it snapped completely, then laughed and said, "Guess it's time to fix that." Everett looked up and smiled, the first real one I'd seen in months. "Yeah," he said, "let's fix it." Not everything can be fixed, but some things, they can grow again, slower, wiser, with new roots. The orchard's second winter after the trust was quiet but not dead. Some trees shed their leaves like a slow exhale. Others stayed strong bark, thickening branches stretching outward, as if reaching towards some memory they refused to lose. Everett built new raised beds near the garden's edge, not because he needed to, but because Marcus asked for a corner to start something of his own. He wanted to grow lavender and lemon balm, not for selling, just for scent, he said, for calm. He'd begun having dreams, of the fire, of my final scream, of April's face twisted in something between terror and remorse. Everett offered him therapy gently. Marcus declined. "Not yet," he said. Not until he figured out what he wanted to say. But that's the thing with grief. It waits. It grows under the surface until it forces itself through the cracks. Marcus finally broke down one evening when he opened the mailbox and found another letter. From Troy, a new address, a fancy logo, another smug offer, not for the land this time, but for speaking rights. Troy wanted to write a rebuttal piece to Letters from the Orchard, calling it inflammatory fiction. He claimed it painted him as a villain, claimed the dead can't give consent to their betrayal, claimed he was the real victim. Everett read the letter, then calmly folded it, walked outside and lit it on fire. But Marcus, he screamed, he roared. All the years of holding it in, of being the polite nephew, the grieving teen, the soft-spoken voice of Jesse's future, it all cracked open. "He killed him," Marcus shouted, pacing the porch like a caged storm. "He manipulated her, destroyed you, and now he wants to play victim. He wants to erase what really happened." Everett tried to quiet him, but I didn't want him quiet. I wanted him loud. That night, Marcus didn't sleep. He sat by the tree with my bench scribbling notes on a legal pad. He wasn't writing poetry. He was planning war. By morning, Marcus had a full campaign outlined, a short documentary, testimonials from grant recipients, audio interviews with neighbors, even a map showing every place on the orchard touched by tragedy and healed by legacy. He called it, "This Land Remembers." Everett was hesitant. "It might stir them up again," he said. "You sure you want that?" Marcus looked him dead in the eye. "You taught me to defend what matters." Everett smiled, proud and pained. "Then do it right." The video went live on a Saturday afternoon. By Monday, it had 500,000 views. By Wednesday, a national outlet picked it up. Suddenly, Jesse Hart wasn't just a name in a local trust. He was a symbol of betrayal, of rebuilding, of reclaiming your name after others try to erase it. April emailed, short, shaken, just 3 lines. I saw the video. I cried through all of it. "I'm sorry I let him turn me into someone I don't recognize." No begging, no request, just a ghost whispering from the distance. Everett didn't respond, but Marcus did. He wrote, "You still have time to become someone you'd recognize again, but you'll have to do that far from here." That week, Everett hosted a dinner, the first real one since my funeral. Long table, burgers, corn, cider. Neighbors gathered under the hanging lights strung between the barn beams. Someone brought a violin, another a guitar. They played songs I used to hum, and then almost as if scripted, Marcus stood and raised a glass. "I never got to say goodbye to Jesse properly," he said, "but every tree on this land, every breath of wind reminds me he never really left. So tonight we stop mourning, and we start living what he would have wanted." They toasted. Everett looked up, eyes shining but dry, then added quietly, "And we protect it, every day." Later that night, after everyone left, Marcus sat alone on my bench. He pulled out a small pouch from his jacket. Inside the silver key to the attic where I used to keep my journals. He held it for a while, then whispered, "Thank you for everything. I hope I made you proud." He'd left the key beneath the tree. I smiled, because yes, he had, more than he'd ever know. The orchard continued. Winters came and went. Students graduated. The Jesse Hart grant expanded to 3 counties. April disappeared from headlines, finally retreating into the quiet she once feared. Troy. He launched another startup, failed, sued someone, faded. That's what cowards do when their shadows don't scare people anymore. And Everett. He slowed, not in will, but in pace. He moved like a man who'd built enough, who knew what mattered, who had nothing left to prove. One spring morning, Marcus found him asleep under the tree my tree. He was holding a photo of us as kids, and he never woke up. They buried him beside me. 2 stones, 2 brothers, 2 seasons of the same life. Marcus planted lavender between our graves and wrote on Everett's he stayed when it was hardest, and because of that, everything bloomed. Legacy is not what you leave, it's what you fight to keep alive, even when no one else believes it's worth saving. The morning after Everett's funeral, the orchard was completely still. No wind, no birds, just that heavy kind of silence that feels like someone holding their breath. Marcus stood between the 2 graves, mine and Everett's, hands in his pockets, eyes low. He wasn't crying. He looked solid, like a man who had come through fire and chosen not to burn. He whispered something. I didn't hear it at first. Then it came again, low and steady. "I forgive you, April." I wasn't sure if I forgave her yet, but Marcus had. And that mattered more now, because forgiveness, true forgiveness, isn't about forgetting what someone did. It's about releasing what you carry, the blade you sleep beside, the knot in your throat every time their name is mentioned. Marcus let go of it that day, not because April deserved it, but because he did. That summer, the orchard bloomed brighter than it had in years. The lavender Everett and Marcus planted took root beside the apple trees. A new bench was placed further up the path overlooking the orchard line. It was engraved with one sentence, "This land remembers." And it did. Every tree, every footstep, every scar in the soil where we once wept or fell or fought to stay alive. It remembered. Marcus kept things going, but in his own way. He didn't try to become Everett, didn't try to become me. He was more methodical, digitalizing records, setting up an online education platform for schools, expanding the legacy program to include not just grants, but emotional support resources. He hired local teens every summer to work the trees. He taught them the names of each plant, each insect, each season. He taught them why it all mattered, and then he listened to their stories too, because that's what I never had time to do enough of, listen. On the 5th anniversary of Everett's death, Marcus hosted the largest legacy festival yet. 1,000 people showed up. The town mayor came, so did a state senator. A choir sang under the barn rafters. Kids ran barefoot through the orchard, laughing so loudly it shook the old apple limbs. And at sunset, Marcus took the stage, held the mic loosely, looked out at the crowd and said, "My family was broken once. Then it was burned, then buried. But we learned that the things worth saving, they don't die. They grow." He paused, then pointed toward the orchard behind him. "This isn't just a farm. It's a promise. To the ones who were lost, to the ones who were left behind, and to the ones still looking for something that tells them you belong here. You matter, you will not be erased." The crowd stood and clapped for nearly a full minute, not because the speech was perfect, but because it was real. That night, Marcus walked the orchard alone, past my bench, past Everett's. He stopped at the far edge where the oldest apple tree leaned gently toward the fence line. There, he buried a time capsule. Inside, a copy of Letters from the Orchard, a photo of Everett holding baby Marcus, a seed packet labeled Jesse's Blend, an apple hybrid Marcus had cultivated in my name, and one handwritten letter. If you find this, then maybe the orchard still stands. If so, know this. You are part of something built on pain, forgiveness, and defiance. That means you're part of something strong, something that will outlast the people who tried to destroy it. Tend it well. Let it grow. And remember, this land knew love. It still does. That was the last time I saw Marcus from the shadow world I'd been trapped in. Something loosened in me that night, some invisible chain. I didn't rise into light, didn't vanish. I just stopped hurting, stopped trying to hold on, stopped needing to be seen, because I had been heard, and that was enough. If you've ever been betrayed by blood, I hope you know it wasn't your fault. If you've ever been erased from your own story, I hope you write a new one louder, bolder, and under your own name. And if you've ever been the one left behind, maybe it's because you are meant to decide what stays and what finally gets buried. Thank you for listening to my story. If it reminded you of your own, tell it, speak it, write it down, because your voice, it deserves roots too. And trust me, someone out there is still listening.